Hello and welcome. I'm Dan McDermott. This is the McDermott Report. We broadcast live Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, midnight Greenwich Mean Time. Joining me, as she often does, is Emily Williams, senior political writer for the Lynchburg Times. Emily, welcome.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, we got a little late start because of a glitch on the audio network, but now we're here. Okay, Emily, it was an eventful day on Wall Street, and I posted something today, and I kind of felt like Dave Thomas from Wendy's when he would try to be serious and post something, or give a speech at a shareholders meeting or something, and people would start laughing, and he didn't know why. So this happened to me today. I posted when I heard it at 1 o'clock. President Obama was supposed to give a speech. It ended up being about 40 minutes late, I think, and I said. President Obama will address the nation at 1 p.m. Eastern from the state dining room, a la FDR, his first fireside chat of the Second Great Depression. And I wasn't, apparently that was funny because the comments were LOL, laughing out loud, terrible, ha ha ha, ridiculous. Posts like this, why you should not eat lunch and read Google Plus, wiping off laptop screen, thank you for the laugh, even though it should not be funny. For a second, I thought this was a news report. I wasn't. I guess I didn't mean to be funny, but I was funny anyway. This was, I guess, expected, right?
Yeah, I mean, him addressing or the collapse itself.
Well, the collapse itself. I mean, Standard & Poor's issues the downgrade, which was expected. They said that they would do it if Washington, our fearless leaders in Washington, didn't reduce the deficit by about $4 trillion, and they did about half that. So then they came out Friday after the markets closed at about 8:30 p.m. I think they announced that the sovereign debt rating for the United States was, for the first time ever, lowered from AAA to AA+. And Asia, I guess, collapsed early last night. And then the United States had its sixth largest drop in the Dow in history, losing 600 and some points. And I guess some states are going to be affected next. Ironically, though, one of several reasons why the Dow dropped is folks are pulling their money out to buy bonds. So actually it became cheaper for the United States to borrow money. So the theory that it was going to cost more didn't happen. And but we still had a big drop in the Dow. I don't think this is over yet. What do you think?
No, I don't think so either. And I mean, part of the reason is it's so wide-reaching in the world. We're seeing problems all throughout all of the markets, really. And you know, I think the one positive thing that I heard today in the news, based on all of this turmoil, is that Japan and China are both looking at their monetary systems and making some adjustments based on how badly the dollar's doing and how badly our economy is doing, which is something that economists and other financial institutions have been pressuring them to do for a while. So this might greatly affect how we do money with Asia in general, which could be a really good thing if we can manage to pull ourselves out of this.
Yeah, I think I think it's. I don't think we ever got out. I don't know what official metrics are used to determine when we're in a recession, but I know that if you go and post an ad on Craigslist or in one of our newspapers for a minimum wage job, you will get 50, 100 applicants within 24 hours, and I've never seen anything like that. And they said the recession ended. And the stocks went up. It's still, even now, the stocks, I think they're still 65% higher than the crash of '08 or the whatever you want to call it. But I think that's play money. I think it's overvalued in the same way that Ron Paul said that the housing market is still overvalued, and I tend to agree with him. And that we're just delaying the inevitable, and we're playing games and propping things up when housing really isn't worth what it's being sold for. I think the same can be applied to the stock exchange. I'm no expert investor, and we were hoping to get one on tonight, but he couldn't do it. But I just do you see any signs of the recession ever having ended and or even getting any better than '08?
You know, we have had some not outstanding but promising job reports that have come out recently, and it just had this big dip, and had this most recent big dip not happened. I mean, the biggest problem with jobs is that companies are still uncertain about the economy, and it's sort of a vicious cycle, because had they become more certain, people would have had more jobs, which would have helped the economy. You know, it's a little cycle that, you know. Now, I think that we're probably right back to where we were. I feel like this probably has wiped out a lot of the progress that we made, which, you know, it's just really disappointing. And I've held myself back from being too concerned about what's going on right now, just because, I mean, the entire world economy is doing the same thing. So this is obviously it's a global problem that is going to need to be addressed by someone. And I think because so many countries are suffering, that there's a lot of smart minds that will be put to work to figure out a solution. So I'm remaining cautiously optimistic about how this will turn out. But maybe that's just maybe that's my youth.
I guess that makes one of us. Yeah, I'm not as optimistic. I think it's going to be bad, but we'll see. I think we're on a house of credit cards, and as a nation, as individuals in a nation, and as a government, for far too long, it's a problem, decades in the making. It's a bipartisan problem, and the folks in Washington, the way they get elected is by special interests, giving money, basically legalized bribery, and that's what our system is. And they can't cut any of those special interests, because then they'll give the other guy money. And that's the way our folks are elected. If you as an individual, Emily, try to contact a legislator versus someone who's given $10,000 or something, whose call is going to get returned quicker? Who's going to have the access on different things all the time? Who's going to get blown off or have all the right things said to her, but really not matter that much? And who's going to really get the attention and the motivation to act of the legislator? I think a lot of that is dictated by money, both parties. So we shall see. To be announced. But look, I guess everything is rosy in London.
If you mean on fire, rosy.
Yeah, I guess this started with a police shooting. Tell us what's going on with the British riots.
Well, the whole thing started with a peaceful demonstration about a police shooting that was called into question. Basically, a peaceful protest about, excessive police violence. And then when the police, I think they patted someone down or something like that, then it all of a sudden turned incredibly violent. And it's been going on for, tonight was the third night, and they're saying it's the worst that, the nation has seen in decades. And, on a global note, it's happening in the Hackney district, which is actually where they were planning on holding the 2012 Olympics. So maybe the rioters are just clearing the way for all the new Olympic construction. It's just a big ploy, but it's been brutal. People throwing trash cans that were on fire at police and buildings, and the kind of thing that when I first heard about it, I came in mid-report and I assumed it was Greece or somewhere other than the UK, and it's incredible.
Yeah, as you know, I used to live there, and I know that we lived in Northwest 8, which initially on Abbey Road in St. John's Wood, and then we moved to Swiss Cottage. So we were in a fairly good area. I think these riots are not in what you'd call a good area. So these are areas that have a history of violence. And I remember as we left, when I was there in the 80s, Margaret Thatcher, Reagan was president here, Thatcher was the prime minister of England, and soon after we left, she instituted a poll tax, they called it. And I remember the kids, some British youth, their slogan was "Can't pay, won't pay," and it was a very unpopular tax, and there was demonstrating and stuff. But yeah, I mean, we look at the history of this country and history of a lot of countries. People riot occasionally. Sometimes they act. Sometimes folks act for a good reason, as we see in Syria, and other times perhaps not. I don't know what the story is here. I don't know if the perception of the police so damaged by the top two officials resigning in the wake of the hacking scandal from the News of the World, and perhaps then this on top of that had anything to do with it, or if that's just coincidental. I'm not sure if anyone's made a connection to that, but we hope our friends across the pond will emerge unscathed. So anyway, all right, you got another one here. I see ABC and Disney are going to stream television to China. I imagine there'll be some captioning going on.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting business move that could really benefit American entertainment companies. China in the past has been a really difficult market for two reasons. First of all, they are of course known for rampant piracy that happens over there. And the second reason is that the nation only allows 20 foreign movies to be shown in their theaters a year. So it was, really difficult to get your movie legitimately shown in China, when sometimes it would be, being passed around on the streets and exported to here illegally. So in a move to make a legitimate presence in the market, companies like Disney and CBS is another one, are making deals with these two internet television / movie sites that I assume are similar to Hulu. They're called Youku and Sohu, I think. I might be pronouncing those incorrectly. But and the idea is really just to hit the internet television market in China, which is apparently booming, and find a legitimate way to, get their content to people and make money off of it.
Yeah, it's I've been to both those sites, and they have a lot of American programs on there. I'm not sure how much of it's legal or not. It's more like a YouTube. What I've seen, where it's individuals uploading stuff. It's sort of a combination of the old Napster or what was this, the service that got sued and shut down. Apparently people use these to share illegal copyright stuff, and there was a lot of that going on.
It sounds like the companies themselves are making the deals.
Oh, yeah. I was just saying that I've actually used these sites, and they're really cool, and you can search in English. I was actually looking for The West Wing because it wasn't available anywhere, and I bought it at Walmart, seasons 1 and 2, and I loaned them to a buddy of mine in Front Royal, and I haven't gotten them back, or at the time I hadn't gotten them back, and I wanted to watch. I was showing someone the great end of first season, and the first episode of the second season. Those are the two episodes that I get someone hooked on the series who says, "Oh, I don't like the series." Well, you watch those two and you're totally hooked. And so I downloaded it. I don't know if it was legally obtainable, but I owned the CD. I still own the DVDs, so I figured I wasn't, going to get arrested or something. But yeah, I think that's a huge market. That's interesting. 24 movies a year. Did they explain why? Is it just their censoring process, I guess, is laborious and they want to cut costs, so they only let a couple dozen in? Or is it the evil Western influence they're afraid will corrupt their country?
I think it's a combination. It's a law that's been on the books for a while, from what I read. And yeah, I think in the article that I read, they actually mentioned wanting to give local work more of a presence, because the U.S. market for entertainment definitely dominates still, even with that limit. So Like they were saying, Avatar was their largest grossing movie last year.
Oh, I bet that hurt. The U.S. But yeah, I remember the U.K. is like that to a degree. They're real. What we call the First Amendment here, the right to freedom of speech. There's no equivalent in the United Kingdom. When I went, what was there, Rambo had come out here, and they banned it in England, which of course drew much more attention to the movie than otherwise it would have received, because it was, I think, one of the things they straight up said, it was too American, too pro-America, because he was killing a bunch of foreigners and waving the flag, and they didn't like that over there. So they banned the movie. Plus, I think there was a little bit of violence, but I don't think it was that bad. Certainly by today's standards, but times change.
Germany is also notorious for banning things like video games for excessive violence, and movies as well.
You would be arrested bringing your laptop into the country, right at customs probably.
Well, we weren't, so.
Luckily, they didn't dig too deeply. Okay, cool. I want to ask you this one story, because you've got a master's degree in journalism, and I'm not sure if you were subject to the No Child Left Behind Act, but I used to have the superintendents. I used to do a talk show in Front Royal on WZRV and WFTR, and it was called The Valley Today. It's still on, and there was a education show. I think it was once a month, and we had the three school superintendents on. Well, they were unanimous in trashing parts of the No Child Left Behind Act, and the whole thing that teachers are now forced to teach to these tests rather than general knowledge. Of course, you could argue that, well, if they can't pass a test, then they don't have general knowledge. And now apparently the administration the idea was that these folks are supposed to meet an acceptable criteria by, I think, 2014, and apparently the tests are too difficult, and so the administration is going to offer waivers to all 50 states if they meet certain criteria. If you give a waiver to a policy to offer it to all 50 states, it would seem, unless you're holding out for Guam and Puerto Rico, it would seem to me that maybe the rules should be removed. But what do you think about the whole notion of federally mandated testing standards? I see the rationale for it, but in practicality, it seems the states are unanimous in not liking it. Does Washington, should they have the right to tell Lynchburg City or Detroit City or Dallas or a little town how their schools should perform? What do you think?
Well, it's hard to weigh in on whether or not they have the right. I think that's beyond my, knowledge of the Constitution. Like, I'd have to do some reading on that one, on whether they have the right to. But I think that the background of why No Child Left Behind came into play, and this new, renewed focusing on education, is that the U.S. was scoring behind a lot of nations on their public education. So there was this real push to bring our schools up to par. And as far as the standardized testing goes, I can see why No Child Left Behind and why tests like that would be important in some schools. In a school that's really struggling to give teachers a strict curriculum to teach off of, it makes sense. But at the same time, it would also limit schools that were doing all right with what they had worked on before. So, it's tricky. And I think the biggest problem with, something like No Child Left Behind is just an oversimplification of the education system. And you have to either go, using the German education system is a good example. It's very standardized, and students are put into different schools based on their abilities at a much younger age, and put on just not only education tracks, but career tracks from a much earlier age. And I think that if the U.S. is planning on reforming our education system with tests like this, we either need to go all in or not at all. It can't be a halfway thing. If we're going to have tests, we need to have a sturdy system to back them up, and not just have them be a hindrance that teachers need to work around at the end of the year. So.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I think this gets into what we talked about. We talked about the woodpecker Thursday, right? Didn't we talk about the woodpecker Thursday? The 11-year-old girl. I think you were on the show. Okay. Well, this 11-year-old girl was at her dad's house. I guess the mother and dad live in separate places. Modern family, and so they're at the dad's house, and there's a baby woodpecker. The woodpecker is apparently about to be attacked by the dad's cat. So the 11-year-old girl rescues the woodpecker, the baby woodpecker, from the cat, and decides to take it home to nurse it back to health, or for whatever reason, to keep it from being eaten by the cat. It would seem to me that the woodpecker would be better off in this little girl's cage for a couple days, fed and cared for, hopefully correctly after internet search of whatever the heck they eat, and then being eaten by the cat. So they're going home to the mom's house. They stop at a Lowe's, and the little girl is worried that the woodpecker is going to be too hot in the car. And of course, this is in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And of course, it's hot, right now over in here in this area. So there happens to be a fish and wildlife person, special agent, in the Lowe's, and sees the little girl holding the cage with the baby woodpecker. So the agent comes over, inquires, determines that this is a violation of a federal law, and I talked to a guy Saturday night who told me about these woodpecker traps you can buy. You can buy them in the store. They're these, I guess, green boxes or brown, whatever they are, and you put a piece of salted ham in the middle, and the woodpeckers land on it. They want to get to the ham, and but they can't penetrate this box, and they'll literally die trying to peck into it. And that's, I guess, legal, and they sell these in hardware stores. But you can't save a woodpecker from a cat, apparently. So anyway, this agent showed up at the girl's house days or weeks later with a $500 and some ticket, a citation for violating federal law. And so they then determined that this was a clerical error and the ticket should never have been finished, although it was submitted, but she tried to take it off. Anyway, this just strikes me as we have too many federal employees. And why do we need a fish and wildlife service that is that encroaching when every state has, to my knowledge, I think every state has its own version, right? Virginia has the Game and Inland Fisheries Department, which handles game and fish, right? Among other things, and state parks, that sort of thing. And I'm a fan. I mean, I'm a former president of the Andy Guest Shenandoah River State Park Friends Group. I was the first president and did it for a couple of years. So I'm pro state parks. I'm pro fish and wildlife and all that stuff. But do we really need all these different agencies? And then we got into the state troopers. Why are state troopers in Virginia running speed traps when every square inch of Virginia is under the jurisdiction of a sheriff's office? Are we duplicating things? I mean, Washington essentially is taking money away from the states and then saying that in order to get the money back, that your state citizens have contributed, in order to get that money back, you have to agree to all these things. Same thing with the highway bills. The reason speed limits were 55 in all 50 states is because the federal government said in order to get the highway funds, federal highway money to your state, you have to agree to all these rules. That's why .01 and then .08 for DUI laws happened everywhere. That's why the speed limits, and all these other things that impact just coincidentally happen to be the same in every state. So I think this is all related to our first story about the economy. I think our country's just got this incredibly huge federal government that has grown way, way beyond the scope originally by the founders. And I see a tie between this this notion of the federal government having this giant agency. I know Reagan wanted to do away with the Department of Education, but they're telling all the states how to do this, and essentially the leverage is we'll give you money if you agree to these rules. So they're all strapped for cash, and so they agree to the rules. But where the hell did the money come from? The money came from the taxpayers in the states. And am I missing something here, or does it seem like our government's just grown and grown, and every year there's more regulations, more employees to enforce them and study them and write them and on and on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest problem with making statements like that about the federal government is that once you start making broad sweeping statements, the entire thing is too big. There are programs that do need regulations, such as, I mean, one good one that we've talked about is the new consumer protection that's facing so much. It's having a hard time getting off the ground because it's being swept into all of these other groups that people view as being too big. It does. It all comes down to like an oversimplification. I'd say that what happened with that woodpecker thing was like a clear case of bureaucracy not being applied to real life correctly. And that happens on every level of government everywhere in the world. So, I mean,
well, okay, but let me tell you the Republican response to that, because I like a lot that Dodd-Frank did. I like on the credit card bills where it tells you that if you pay the minimum payment, you'll pay off your money in the next 72 years. If you I think mine actually said if you pay the minimum payment, you'll pay it off in 38 years. If you pay an extra $100, you'll pay it off in 3 years, and save God knows how much money. And I like that stuff. I like that the debit cards, that they can't. If you have $5 left in your checking account and you try to swipe a card to buy $8 worth of stuff, they would ping you a $35 fee. And if you did it a couple times, you'd have multiple fees that day. Well, that seemed outrageous. Why don't they just, make it so it doesn't work? You don't have this much money in. No foul, right? You haven't charged anything, because they have the technology to instantly check, right? So why do they play this game where you don't know how much is on it, so you swipe the card? I mean, obviously you should keep a balance, etc. But for those who don't, they swipe it, and then they would get these huge fees, and these fees would be applied to the people who can least afford it, obviously, because if you're rich, you don't run out of money in your spending account, or if you did, you would just pay the fees and you wouldn't care, but you just forgot to transfer money. But the impact of that, well, that sounds great, and I like that, and I was happy, and I was waiting for either. I have, I don't know, like 6 different bank accounts for different businesses and my personal stuff, but I was waiting for one of the. We're 2 different banks. I was waiting for either of them to call me to offer me a plan to avoid. They were renaming it, so they could stick you with these fees again. I was waiting for them to try it with me, but neither one did. But the impact was now, like First Bank and Front Royal, which used to charge these fees, now they've gotten rid of all their free checking accounts, because that's how they would make the money. That, among other things. So it's sort of like, are you the old system? Even though I liked the idea of not having to worry about this, although I never did it and had to pay the fee. But it seemed unfair that if they can make it so the card just doesn't work in the checkout lane, do it, But the impact was, are you better off now where folks with not very much money are now all going to have to pay monthly fees, or if they don't meet a minimum balance, or were they better off where the responsible ones had free checking, but the irresponsible ones or disorganized ones paid these fees? I mean, what's the better solution given those options?
I mean, the simple fact of the matter is that by paying for charging customers for checking accounts is an upfront, honest way of doing business, and making all of your money off of, people who use their debit card irresponsibly is a really behind, under the table kind of sketchy way. And that was where all of the banks were making all of their big bucks. I mean, I understand your argument that it might have been better before. But we should also point out that that agency, that new regulatory agency, covers so much more than just that. I mean, we're talking about, it's obvious that people need, the company shouldn't be able to offer crazy loans to people who don't have money to buy houses. I mean, that was, part of the initial problem, and, that's another thing that's covered. Armed service members having protection, and, there's just, regulation does good things and regulation does bad things. And I think that oversimplifying matters for rhetoric purposes, which is something that our nation does a lot right now in its political scene on every side, just hurts matters, makes it so things don't get done. You can yell that we need regulation and you can yell that we don't need regulation, but someone's got to be in the middle saying, well, we need this regulation, but we don't need that regulation.
Yeah, I was being the devil's advocate. Personally, I think screw the banks. If they were doing that crap, they were charging fees they didn't have to charge. It was just a way to make cash from the poorest people who have no influence and just exploiting them, like a state lottery, which is basically a tax on stupid people. And they were also, things like ordering when you get 6 different charges, and you run them biggest first, even if they didn't come in that way, so that you could bounce the others. Those are sleazy, crooked people, and if they lose their job, I think that's great. More power to them. And I have no sympathy for them. But I did want to offer the other view, which is, a legitimate view. You think Donald Trump, ABC News, is saying that he might go in? Now he's saying, I would seriously consider running as an independent. I think it's maybe a time for that. I think it'd be great. I think, is it a sign that I don't think any of these Republicans can beat Obama? I'm not convinced that any of them would do any better. There's no Reagan in there.
Yeah.
I just don't, but it's still early, right? And we'll know more about these guys once they choose somebody. But so far, I'm not at all impressed with any of these guys as far as their ability to beat Obama. I'm not saying that individually they're not interesting or maybe have good ideas. I love Ron Paul. I love watching him, although I don't agree with all the stuff like the gold standard, although it's looking pretty good this week. But I just, what do you think? What is this? Does this mean anything?
I think if the debt ceiling taught us anything about where the parties stand right now, it's that the Republican Party has a big divide in it right now. There's this really, and until they can solve that, I think it's understandable to make statements like they don't have a strong enough candidate yet. And just the fact that Trump is mentioning doing stuff like that, part of me thinks that, if anyone in the Republican Party was seriously putting their money on anyone right now, that one of his buddies would have said, don't even talk about that. I think that, Trump running as an independent would totally pull votes away that they so desperately need. So, but if he did it, it would certainly make the race very interesting and the debates much more fun to watch.
Oh, God, yeah. I think it would be terrific. Bring it. The Republicans wouldn't want it because he would obviously draw more from the Republican side than the Democrats. I guess. I don't know. I think we're screwed, and it doesn't matter who's in there because both parties caused the problem, and I don't see anybody really fixing it because, even Ryan's plan, which the Wisconsin Representative Paul Ryan, who I think I got the state wrong. I apologize if I did. He's the budget chairman in the House. Even his plan exempts, I think, the Holy Grail Social Security. Really, we need to raise the entry age. When it started, I think there were 6 workers for every retiree. Now that there's the inverse, and I think when they started that, it was the life expectancy was 5 or 6 years after you got on Social Security. Now it's like 18 years, and we just don't have the money. I don't think we should impact people, about to enter it. But, folks like you and me, especially you, because you're like 19 or something, then you can wait a little longer. You can work, welcome to Walmart a few years before. Anyway, all right. So tell me about erasable e-paper. That seems like, isn't that? What is that? I mean, that seems like anything electronic you could erase. What's the big deal? What is this about?
Yeah, when I first read this headline, which was I think the headline reads, "Tokyo company invents erasable paper." I was like, it's regular paper erasable if you use a pencil. It was yeah. And after reading it, I definitely still has. At first I thought, with e-readers and electronics and what have you, really there's no need for this. But they did make a good point on what it could be used for. So the technology behind it is basically they use a thermal printer, which is apparently what fax machines used to use. But fax machines kind of fell in between my ever needing to use them. I went from copy machine to scanner. Fax machines were never really my technology. But this uses the same kind of thermal printing, and then the paper itself, you can apparently flip a switch, and it will just erase it. And with the current technology, we'll reuse each sheet of paper 260 times, and an A4 size piece of paper costs $2. So what they're saying it could be used for, the company's name is Industrial Tech Research Institute. They say that the best application would be for posters or signs that, companies or what have you use regularly, and also for tickets or badges, temporary ones. So, I can see those applications because those are things that that you can't really put like a mini e-reader on your shirt, but an electronic piece of paper that, say needs to be updated or what have you from time to time, that makes sense. Or the tickets they were talking about were for like mass transit. So instead of buying, I used to use the trains in Boston to get to work. And instead of buying like a flimsy paper ticket each week, you could have one that you could insert and it would reprint something on it or what have you. So I think there are some applications. But it's definitely something that they're going to need someone with creativity to run with it.
Yeah, I thought you meant like a backspace character. When you said erasable e-paper, I thought, well, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
You can delete a character?
No, this is actually, yeah, and it feels like paper. It's flexible and, soft, they say, so.
All right. Exciting events in e-news. Okay, now this last story, unless we find something fun. The House Page program. This is kind of sad, but I guess it makes sense. I remember I've seen the building. It's really nice. I was going to speak to a class for a friend of mine who works at, he's a Fox News reporter, producer, and he teaches a college class. And these folks are, I think it's Ohio State or something, but they come to D.C., and I was the guest speaker. And it was a prestigious gig because the speaker before me was a Supreme Court justice, and the speaker after me was a trip to meet the press, to meet the host. So it was kind of cool to be in between those two. I was in good company. And anyways, I parked at some random spot, and I walked by this building. It was sort of definitely a government building, real modern, looks like a fancy apartment building, and it was all gated and stuff. And it said the U.S. House of Representatives Page program. And I guess it was within walking distance. It was on Capitol Hill. But really nice digs. And I guess, for security, you're dealing with high school kids, right? So you wanted to make sure, no London rioters could approach the building. But a buddy of mine is a state senator, and his son was a page in the state Senate. And it's a good educational program, and I think they get paid. But tell us exactly what they do and why this decision that I guess is a year in the making is going to hit the House.
Well, the PAGE program is pretty much the ultimate internship program for anyone interested in politics. or law, really. And it's very competitive to get into. And, I didn't actually look into the details of what they do, but pages in general pass messages back and forth between politicians, right? I mean, I'm not sure if they do anything different on the House level, but the important parts, though, I think, is that the people in this internship were making $1,800 a month. So when I first read that, I was like, that's a fair amount of money for an internship. But when you break it down, if they make that much money and they're working 40 hours a week, it comes out to about $11 an hour. So really, about the same as what you'd make pretty much at any job at that age.
Well, plus rent, right?
Well,
they get to live in
take
this.
the rent out.
They get to live.
They take,
Oh, they take rent out.
No. Yeah, they take 35% of that $1,800 out for room and board. So, I mean, they don't even pocket all of it.
But that's a scam. It's still the federal government is paying them and then taking some of it back. But it's the same as if they paid them, $14.50 or whatever, and just gave them free rent. I guess part of it is to learn that you pay rent in life, or a mortgage payment. Now, of course, everyone pays rent because everyone's being foreclosed upon.
Yeah, most internships that pay you will actually do something like that. So that's not unheard of. That's pretty normal. But what it came down to money wise was they said about $5 million a year for all of the pages all together. So it was a good chunk of money, and I understand why they do that. I mean, in these tight economic times, everyone really says that. But the biggest thing that this brought up for me is it's sort of like the ultimate demise of the paid internship, which has been happening all over for quite some time now. College students have actually, instead of getting paid for internships, have started paying to get internships, which is this ridiculous turnaround. Which, I mean, it used to be that if you got an internship, you'd at least get cost of living, like a stipend out of it. But now it's turned into, I think, the Washington Post was one of the first newspapers that started doing it. They started sending schools to pay money in order for their kids to get into their internship program, which is one of the most prestigious internships that you can get in journalism.
Was this was this the same publisher who was charging people to have dinners with influential people, and she was roundly criticized? That's insane. I don't even think that's legal, because I looked into this for interns, for the newspapers. I was like, what are the laws? Because there's a minimum wage, but then an intern, can you just basically get kids and it's free slave labor? How does that work? And apparently you can't do that. There are rules, right? You have to pay something under certain circumstances. I'm not sure how it works.
Well, how companies get around paying minimum wage to interns is that there's some legal pocket you can go through, or you can say their educational experience working for the company is how you're paying them. It essentially turns into college credits instead of actual money. So
they're getting credit and they're paying for the college credit. That's the scam the Post is running. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It really turns into not just unpaid slave labor, but the slaves paying to do the labor.
See, what I'm thinking in my head. What I'm thinking in my head is I'll go to LFCC, Lord Fairfax Community College. I'll go to Central Virginia Community College, and we'll make a deal where they advertise, right? And so I'll say, okay, I'll give you X amount of advertising in the papers, and then you give me some kids, and we'll make them, basically slaves, and then we'll charge them money, and then you give them college credit, and then but I get the money from the kids, and then you can you give them the college credit, so they're paying and they're getting what they would get in a class, but they're getting credit. I'm getting free labor, and I'll give you a kickback of free advertising worth that much. That'd be a great scam. I'm joking. I wouldn't do this. Although it would probably work, right? It'd probably all be legal.
Yeah.
Because Washington said so.
Stuff like this it's happening all over the nation, and college students are really desperate right now, especially since getting jobs without any experience and education is one of the worst positions you can be in. And I mean, probably the worst part about this scam is not so much that they're, paying to be used as slaves. It's and I apologize for using really strong language on this, but I am very fresh out of the academia system, and my college loan bills are due soon, so it's a testy time of the month for me, education-wise. But the worst part about it is that an internship used to mean that if you interned with a company, you were likely to get a job with them afterwards. But, in this job climate where new hires are few and far between, a lot of these kids are paying for internships and then not getting jobs at the other end. And, it just feeds back into this huge problem with higher education right now where, kids just can't... Getting a college degree does not equal a job, and college costs more than it ever did. So,
yeah, I think they're invaluable. I mean, I was joking about setting up a scam with the community colleges and giving them a kickback, and I get slaves. But I'm sure some internships are like that. But I think working at the Post would be a huge thing. For one, if I would know the kid was special, right? Because I get a lot of applications for different, everyone wants to write. And most of them, can barely write their name. I mean, they're terrible. And they don't know how to write a story. They don't know how to spell. They don't know just basic rules of grammar. I want them to go back to whatever school graduated them and demand their money back or, free remedial classes or something, because these people just can't write. Now, I couldn't write at 18 like I can now, but it's just awful. And when I see someone like you, or I saw another young man, James Holman, who's now with Politico. I met him when he was a relatively junior level reporter at the Washington Post out of the Loudoun Bureau. We were both covering the same story, and I was struck. This guy's probably about your age, and I was like, man, this guy's an amazing writer. He can sit, and then they had him doing book reviews because he would write. He can read it overnight. He's just in his shorthand. I saw him. He could write shorthand quicker than the fastest typist I've seen. I couldn't read any of it. It was just squiggly lines. And I said, how'd you learn? They said, I kind of taught myself. It's my own version. And I was just, this guy's a genius. And then Politico snapped him up as a congressional reporter, and now he's a national political writer. And he's terrific. He's a great guy. So I see these gems, right? And that's the kind of person you'd expect from the Washington Post internship program. And I think it would present an invaluable experience. For example, you remember that story they did maybe a year ago or so where they said that there are X 100,000 private contractors working for the federal government, and nobody knows about this or something. It was all from public records, but they were exposing all these companies that have a sign and nobody really knows what they do. Smithson, and that's all it says, and nobody's ever heard of that, but they have a bunch of people go in and they all have ID cards and they go in the building every day, and everyone in Northern Virginia knows what's going on. But to be an intern on something like that, where you're doing an investigation, I think it was a 1.5 year long investigation with a Pulitzer Prize winning writer and her staff. It's the kind of thing only a print organization would normally do. I mean, I can't see a local network television news affiliate getting a Pulitzer Prize winning writer and paying her for a 1.5 years for one story, right? But I think that would be incredible experience as an intern, to be able to work on something like that, to show you can hold a secret, you can contribute to something, and find out how the world really works. Because you can look at all the theory you want, but until you wrote for the Boston Herald or the Globe, I got to clarify that, because that's like saying someone's from Greece or Turkey. It's a big deal if you get it wrong.
Yeah, you got to say Globe.
The Boston Globe. And you were an investigative reporter, and now you're working for the prestigious Lynchburg Times, which I own. I'm joking. And I know our college loans are due, so I know what phone call is going to be coming soon. Dan, I need my check.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think that would be invaluable. And I don't know. We got to find out what the rules are, because I'm curious. But yeah, this is just more evidence that I'm not trying to be depressing and get a bunch of gold and storable foods advertisers on the show or something, but I'm worried. I think the economy is not healed. I think that I don't see why the government can say unemployment's 9.1% when only 52 or 54% of Americans work. 40-some% do not work. Now, you're including inmates. I guess, I don't know if that counts as work. I guess they get 18 cents an hour. But people who do not work, it's in the 40 percentile, right? And I just, I'm getting, I don't know. I'm getting all these pop-ups. I don't know if you can hear it, but I got an Android phone, and it's like the size of a tablet almost. And I had to get all these Google accounts for it, and I haven't figured out exactly how to shut stuff off. So if you hear some weird noise, it's my newbiness. But anyway, I don't know what. Any thoughts? I've been rambling.
Well, I think that, I mean, I think the number of unemployed, highly educated youth is something that the nation's going to have to worry about in the future. I know that I just heard a report this morning about highly educated youth in Spain that are learning German and English so that they can move elsewhere to get jobs. And I think that if the U.S. doesn't do more to accommodate its, college-educated populations, that, I will probably overlook, because I know I have never applied for unemployment, even though I've been underemployed quite a bit since I graduated. So I think that we're a number that tends to get ignored. But I think if something's not done in the future, we're just going to be another large, angry youth mass. I'm not saying we're going to riot like the Middle East, but we might head over to China or Japan or where have you to get jobs, which is never a good thing for a nation. So.
Yeah, I agree. And do I look like Kevin Spacey? Another person just told me this. I'm trying to think. That's the guy from Play the Alien, right?
I don't know.
That's off top. I just got it. That was the pop-up. She said I look like Kevin Spacey. That's funny.
Oh, yeah. Like Kevin Spacey. Kevin Spacey?
The actor. Yeah, I hear this a lot. I don't know. But I'm smushed on the Justin TV, on the live stream. I'm smushed like this way, so I'm skinnier than. I mean, I'm not fat, but I'm emaciated on the Justin. But on the YouTube, it's normal. So I don't know.
You have more hair than Kevin Spacey does.
Thanks. That's a compliment in at my age. Yeah, Christina Trapolino just said that. She said, it's kind of flattering. Guess what'd she say? She said that. I think she's teasing me. She said, so I was adding Kevin Spacey on Twitter today and realized he's still one of the top 3 Hollywood crushes, and he kind of looks like you, except older. I think she has a Dan crush, maybe. I don't know. She just said I could mention it, but then now I just get, but only the second part, which I've already spilled the guts. No, okay, I'm in trouble. Now Kevin Spacey knows that she likes him. Everyone has crushes. I had, I think Tiffany when I was a kid, or one of those teen, whatever. I don't know. She's my age now, but was then, I guess. One of those girls. All right, Emily, who's your secret crush? Who's famous? Who's on your list of people you're allowed to, if he calls? Brad Pitt or somebody, probably. I don't know.
Christian Bale.
Okay, that's your list. If it's understood, if Christian calls, then your man's in trouble. Everyone has their list. All right. Hey, Emily Williams, senior political writer, former unpaid intern. Just kidding. Barely paid intern. The interns make more than we do, probably.
Yeah, they do.
She is the senior political writer for the Lynchburg Times newspaper. You can check out her wonderful writing at lynchburgtimes.com. That's lynchburgtimes.com, where she hangs out. You can also find her gplus.to/EmilyKW. That is her Google Plus page. You should add her on there. She's on Facebook and everywhere. And her picture in most of these profiles is what you're seeing on the screen now. If you'd like to add me on Google Plus and put me in a circle, put me in my place, my Google Plus short URL is gplus.to/McDermott. And we'll be back tomorrow night. I think, I'm not sure who's on tomorrow night, but Emily will be back Wednesday and Thursday. Friday, Christina Trapolino's on the show with Google Plus Week, our most popular show, believe it or not. I think that's partly because it's got 3 days to get viewers, whereas the others only have 24 hours. So it's kind of a scam, right? Like the internship thing. at the Washington Post. Okay, Emily, once again, thank you very much. Have a great rest of your Monday evening, and I guess we'll be watching the Dow tomorrow and seeing as the American house of credit cards continues to topple. Folks, thanks for watching. I'll be back tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, midnight GMT for our rioting friends. Have a great night. Thanks.